first rays of the morning sun stretched across the beautiful city of Enugu, bathing its busy streets in a warm golden glow. Traders were already arranging their goods in Ogbit Market. Commercial buses honked impatiently as they picked up passengers heading to work. Motorcycles weaved through traffic while office workers hurried along the sidewalks with cups of coffee in one hand and briefcases in the other. Standing on the top floor of a magnificent glass building overlooking the city was Obinna Okafor. At just 32 years old, Obinna had achieved what many people could only dream of. He was one of the youngest billionaires in southeastern Nigeria and the founder of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited, one of the largest construction companies in Enugu State. His company had built luxury estates, highways, hospitals, schools, shopping complexes, and office towers across Nigeria. His success had earned him wealth beyond imagination. He owned several mansions, luxury cars, private investments, and shares in multiple businesses. Newspapers regularly featured his achievements, while television stations praised him as one of Nigeria's brightest entrepreneurs. Yet despite all his success, Obinna was deeply unhappy that morning. He stood silently beside the large window in his office, staring at the moving traffic below. His expensive navy blue suit was perfectly tailored, but his face carried the weight of someone burdened by troubling thoughts. A soft knock interrupted his silence. "Come in," he said. His longtime personal assistant, Chinedu, stepped inside carrying a folder. "Good morning, sir." "Morning, Chinedu. You have a meeting with the investors by 9, another with the state commissioner by 11, and dinner with the governor's forum tonight." Obinna nodded absent-mindedly. "Cancel everything." Chinedu blinked. "Everything, sir?" "Everything. But these meetings have been scheduled for weeks." "I know. The investors are flying in from Abuja." "I said cancel them." Chinedu knew better than to argue further. "Yes, sir." He placed the folder on the desk but hesitated before leaving. "Sir, if I may ask, is something wrong?" Obinna sighed. "I've built a successful company, Chinedu." "Yes, sir. But I don't know what kind of people are actually working inside it." Chinedu looked confused. "What do you mean?" Obinna turned away from the window. "For months now, I've been receiving anonymous letters." He opened a drawer and removed a thick envelope. Inside were dozens of handwritten notes. He handed several to Chinedu. One read, "Your managers insult poor people every day." Another said, "Promotion only goes to people who pay bribes." Another read, "Customers are treated differently depending on how rich they look." One message hit Obinna the hardest. "Your company has forgotten the values you built it on." Chinedu slowly lowered the papers. "Anyone could have written these." "I thought so too. So we investigated. And..." Obinna walked to his desk and opened another file. "I hired 3 consulting firms. They reported that everything was excellent." "Exactly." Chinedu smiled. "So perhaps the complaints aren't true." Obinna shook his head. "Then I sent secret shoppers." "What happened?" "They were treated well." Chinedu looked relieved. "But..." Obinna's expression darkened. "I also sent one old man dressed in torn clothes." Chinedu's smile disappeared. "He wasn't allowed inside." "What?" "The security guards chased him away before he could even explain why he came." Chinedu frowned. "Maybe they thought he was a beggar." Obinna stared directly at him. He was carrying documents for a building contract worth 300 million naira. Silence filled the office. He represented a wealthy investor. Chinedu slowly sat down. "Oh," Obinna continued, "the investor only wanted to know how my company treated ordinary people." "What happened?" "He withdrew the contract." Chinedu sighed heavily. "I'm sorry, sir." Obinna nodded. "That's not all." He pulled out another report. "A cleaner resigned after 5 years." "Why?" "She said managers called her useless every day." Another document. "A security guard quit because supervisors insulted him constantly." Another. "A receptionist cried in the restroom because senior staff humiliated her in front of customers." Obinna closed the file. "I built this company with respect." He looked around his luxurious office. When I started this business 12 years ago, I couldn't even afford decent shoes. Chinedu remembered those days. Obinna had begun as a struggling young engineer working on construction sites himself. He had mixed cement. He had carried blocks. He had slept inside unfinished buildings to save money. He knew poverty. He knew hunger. He knew what it felt like to be ignored because of worn-out clothes. That experience had shaped the kind of company he wanted to build. Every worker deserved respect. Every customer deserved kindness. Every cleaner deserved dignity. Somewhere along the way, those values had been lost. "I've trusted reports for too long," Obinna said quietly. "I'm going to find out the truth myself." Chinedu frowned. "What are you planning?" Obinna smiled for the first time that morning. "I'm getting a new job." 3 days later, no one recognized the man standing outside a tiny tailoring shop on the outskirts of Enugu. His neatly trimmed beard had been replaced with rough facial hair. His expensive haircut had disappeared beneath a faded cap. The tailor handed him a worn-out security uniform. "It belonged to my cousin," the old man said. "He changed jobs." Obinna thanked him. He carried the uniform into the changing room. Minutes later, a completely different man emerged. The crisp billionaire was gone. Standing there instead was someone who looked tired from years of hard work. The oversized uniform had faded from years of washing. The black boots were scratched. The cap was old. He looked into the mirror. Even he barely recognized himself. The tailor smiled. "You truly look like a security guard." Obinna laughed. "That's exactly what I need." Next, he visited a makeup artist hired under a confidentiality agreement. She darkened parts of his skin with harmless cosmetic products to mimic years of working under the sun. She added slight wrinkles around his eyes. She made him appear older and more weathered. When she finished, she gasped. "You don't even look rich anymore." Obinna smiled. "Perfect." She tilted her head. "Can I ask why you're doing this?" "I want to know the truth." Later that evening, Obinna gathered only 3 trusted people in his private study. His lawyer, his personal assistant, and the chairman of the board. The elderly chairman folded his arms. "This is dangerous." "I know. What if someone attacks you?" "I'll take the risk." "They could insult you." "I expect that." "They could even fire you." Obinna smiled. "That would tell me everything I need to know." His lawyer spoke carefully. "How long do you plan to do this?" "Until I know exactly who deserves to remain in my company." The chairman sighed. "I've never heard of a billionaire becoming a security guard." Obinna chuckled. "Then perhaps it's time someone did." The following Monday morning, before sunrise, Obinna arrived at the company gates riding an old motorcycle borrowed from one of his drivers. The security supervisor looked at him briefly. "You must be the new man." "Yes, sir." "Name?" "Obi." He deliberately shortened his name. No one would suspect that Obi was actually Obinna Okafor. The supervisor barely looked up from his paperwork. "Have you worked security before?" "A little." "You'll learn." He pointed toward the main entrance. "Stand there. No unnecessary talking. No sitting. No sleeping. No using your phone." "Understood." "Salary is paid monthly." Obinna nodded. "Thank you." The supervisor walked away without another word. Obinna stood quietly beside the large company gate. Employees gradually began arriving. Luxury SUVs rolled into the compound. Managers stepped out wearing expensive suits. Many walked past him without even looking at his face. Some tossed their ID cards toward him carelessly. One executive frowned. "Open the gate faster." Another complained. "Why are there so many new security guards these days?" One woman looked at him with obvious disgust before entering the building. Obinna simply watched. He wasn't angry. He was observing. Every greeting, every insult, every expression, every act of kindness. He mentally noted everything. Around 8:30, a young cleaner carrying a heavy bucket struggled toward the entrance. No one stopped to help her. Instead, 2 employees laughed as water splashed onto her shoes. She quietly apologized even though the accident wasn't her fault. Obinna immediately walked over. "Let me help you." The young woman looked surprised. "You don't have to. It's all right." Together they carried the heavy bucket into the building. As they walked, she smiled gratefully. "Thank you." "It's nothing," she sighed. "You're the first person who's helped me all week." Those simple words pierced Obinna's heart. He had only been at the company for less than an hour. Already, he had seen more than the polished reports on his desk had ever revealed. As he returned to his post, he looked toward the towering headquarters of the company he had spent years building from nothing. From the outside, it looked like a symbol of excellence. Inside, however, he was beginning to suspect that something far more troubling was hidden beneath its polished floors and shining glass walls. Obinna tightened his grip on his security baton and took a slow breath. This was no longer just an experiment. It had become a mission. He would uncover the truth, no matter how painful it was. And he had no idea that before this mission was over, one unexpected encounter at the company gate would completely change not only his business, but also his heart. The woman who would one day become the love of his life had not yet arrived, but fate was already leading her toward him. The second morning of Obinna's undercover mission began long before sunrise. The air over Enugu was cool, and a light mist hung over the streets as people slowly began another workday. By 6 o'clock, the compound of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited was already coming alive. The cleaning staff swept the walkways while gardeners watered colorful flowers planted around the modern office building. Standing quietly at the main gate was Obi, the name everyone now knew him by. No one suspected that beneath the faded security uniform was the billionaire owner of the entire company. Obinna adjusted his cap and looked around carefully. He had spent only one day as a security guard, yet he had already learned more about his company than months of expensive investigations had revealed. People behaved very differently when they thought no one important was watching. Some greeted the cleaners with respect. Many completely ignored them. Others spoke to junior staff as though they were less than human. Every smile, every insult, every careless remark. Obinna noticed everything. He had brought along a small notebook hidden inside his pocket. Whenever no one was watching, he quietly wrote down names, times, and incidents. He was determined to discover the truth. At exactly 7:30, the first wave of employees began arriving. A black Lexus SUV stopped at the entrance. The driver hurried to open the back door for a middle-aged manager wearing an expensive gray suit. The man stepped out without acknowledging anyone. Obinna politely saluted. "Good morning, sir." The manager barely glanced at him. Instead, he threw his access card toward Obinna. "Open the gate." The card landed on the ground. Obinna bent down, picked it up calmly, scanned it, and opened the gate. Not a single thank you. The manager disappeared into the building. A few minutes later, another executive arrived. This one frowned immediately. "You're new." "Yes, sir." "Don't lean against the wall." "I wasn't, sir." "I said don't." "Yes, sir." The executive walked away. Obinna simply smiled to himself. If he had entered the company as its owner, every employee would have rushed to greet him. As a security guard, he had become invisible, and invisible people often witnessed the truth. The morning continued. Several employees passed by without saying a word. Some even avoided eye contact. One young intern smiled politely. "Good morning." Obinna smiled back. "Good morning." It was such a simple exchange, yet it stood out because it had become so rare. Around 8 o'clock, a white Toyota Corolla drove into the compound. The driver parked carefully before a young woman stepped out. She wore a simple navy blue office gown that fit her perfectly. Her shoulder-length natural hair was neatly arranged. She carried a modest handbag and several files pressed against her chest. Unlike many of the other workers, she wasn't dressed to impress anyone. She simply looked professional. As she approached the gate, she noticed Obinna standing there. She smiled warmly. "Good morning." The smile caught him by surprise. It wasn't forced. It wasn't polite because she wanted something. It was genuine. "Good morning," Obinna replied. "I don't think we've met. I'm new." "Oh." She stretched out her hand. "My name is Adiz." For a brief second, Obinna almost forgot he was undercover. Very few employees would willingly shake hands with a security guard. He quickly recovered. "I'm Obi. It's nice to meet you, Obi." "You too." She noticed he looked slightly uncomfortable. "Is everything all right?" "Yes." "You seem surprised." Obinna laughed softly. "I wasn't expecting anyone to introduce themselves." Adiz looked puzzled. "Why wouldn't I?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened the gate for her. She smiled again. "Thank you. You have a nice day." "You too." She disappeared into the building. Obinna watched her go. That simple interaction lingered in his mind far longer than he expected. He had met hundreds of successful businesswomen. Many had wanted his attention because of his money. Others had admired his influence. But Adiz didn't know who he really was. She believed he was nothing more than a poorly paid security guard. Yet she had greeted him like an equal. For the first time since putting on the uniform, Obinna smiled from the bottom of his heart. Perhaps there were still good people working in his company. By mid-morning, the compound grew busier. Customers arrived to make inquiries. Contractors attended meetings. Suppliers delivered construction materials. Obinna carefully observed how each visitor was treated. One wealthy businessman stepped out of a brand-new Mercedes-Benz. Immediately, the receptionist rushed outside. "Good morning, sir." Managers hurried downstairs to welcome him. Someone even offered him bottled water before he entered the building. Less than 20 minutes later, an elderly man wearing worn sandals arrived carrying a brown envelope. He looked nervous. "I came to submit these building documents." One receptionist looked at his clothes. "Who invited you?" "No one." "Then leave them." "I was told someone would receive me." "We're busy." "But." "I said we're busy." The old man lowered his head sadly. Obinna quietly watched from the gate. The contrast made his heart heavy. The rich were welcomed. The poor were dismissed before speaking. This was exactly what he feared had become of his company. Around lunchtime, the security guards rotated shifts. The older guards gathered beneath a shaded area to eat. Obinna joined them quietly. One of them laughed. "New man." "Yes." "You brought food." Obinna smiled. "No." "You'll learn." Another guard sighed. "Most of us survive on pure water until evening." A younger guard nodded. "The salary isn't enough." Another laughed bitterly. "The managers think security guards don't get hungry." They all laughed. Not because it was funny, because they had accepted it as normal. Obinna listened carefully. No one complained about the company openly. Instead, they spoke about life. School fees, house rent, medical bills, children, dreams they could no longer afford. These were the people who protected his company every day. Yet very few executives even knew their names. He quietly wrote another note inside his pocket. "Review security staff welfare immediately." As they prepared to return to duty, someone called out from behind them. "Excuse me." Obinna turned. It was Adiz. She carried a small paper bag. "You didn't eat." Obinna looked surprised. "I noticed." She held out the bag. "I bought 2 meat pies this morning. I've only eaten one. You can have the other." Obinna blinked. "No. It's all right. I insist. I don't want to inconvenience you." She smiled. "It's hardly an inconvenience." He accepted the bag slowly. "Thank you. You work long hours. You shouldn't skip meals." One of the other security guards looked completely shocked. An accountant buying food for a security guard? He had never seen such a thing. Adiz waved gently. "I have to get back upstairs. Enjoy your lunch." "Thank you." She walked away. The older guard whistled. "My friend." Obinna laughed. "What? You must know somebody." "I don't." "Then why is an accountant bringing you lunch?" "I honestly don't know." Another guard chuckled. "She's different." Obinna quietly opened the paper bag. Inside was not 1 meat pie. There were 2. She had lied. She hadn't shared her extra food. She had bought lunch specifically for him. For a long moment, Obinna couldn't speak. He remembered the years when he was a struggling engineer. There had been days when complete strangers had shared food with him. He had promised himself that if he ever became successful, he would never forget those acts of kindness. Looking down at the warm meat pies in his hands, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Gratitude. Later that afternoon, heavy rain suddenly poured over Enugu. Employees rushed toward their cars holding bags over their heads. Some laughed. Others complained. The security guards remained outside in the rain. It was their job. As Obinna helped direct vehicles through the wet entrance, he heard someone calling. Obi! He turned. Adiz stood beneath the building entrance holding a large umbrella. You'll get soaked. He smiled. It's part of the job. She walked toward him despite the rain. Without saying another word, she stretched the umbrella over both of them. You don't have to do this. I know. You'll get wet. So will you. He laughed. I've survived worse. She smiled. My father used to say something. What? The way you treat people who cannot repay you says everything about your character. Obinna stared at her. Those exact words were almost identical to something his own late mother used to tell him. He looked at her differently. There was kindness in her eyes. Not pity. Not pride. Just simple human kindness. Before either of them could continue, another employee walked past. The woman looked at Adiz with surprise. Why are you standing with the security guard? Adiz answered calmly. Because it's raining. The woman laughed. You'll never change. She walked away shaking her head. Adiz simply smiled. Some people think kindness is strange. Obinna nodded slowly. They're wrong. By the time work ended, the rain had stopped. Employees streamed out of the building, eager to return home. Many ignored the security guards completely. Some threw wrappers onto the ground for cleaners to pick up. Others complained loudly about minor inconveniences. Adiz was among the last to leave. As she reached the gate, she smiled once more. Good night, Obi. Good night. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll be here. She laughed softly. I know. She walked toward the bus stop instead of a luxury car. Obinna watched until she disappeared into the evening crowd. He couldn't stop thinking about her. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't pretending. She simply treated everyone with respect. As darkness settled over the company compound, Obinna sat alone inside the small security office. He opened his notebook and reviewed everything he had written during the day. Several pages were filled with reports of arrogance, favoritism, and disrespect. But among all the ugly incidents, he wrote one final sentence before closing the notebook. Employee Adiz. Position, accountant. Honest. Humble. Treats every person with dignity regardless of status. He stared at the words for a long time. Then he smiled to himself. His undercover mission had only just begun. He had entered the company expecting to uncover corruption. Instead, on only his second day, he had discovered something he never expected to find. A woman with a genuinely kind heart. He did not yet realize it, but every cheerful good morning, every shared meal, and every simple conversation with Adiz was quietly laying the foundation for a love story that would change both of their lives forever. The third week of Obinna's undercover mission began with a painful realization. The impressive glass headquarters of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited looked like the perfect workplace from the outside. Every visitor admired its spotless compound, beautiful gardens, and modern architecture. Newspapers often described it as one of the most respected companies in Enugu. But Obinna had learned something that very few people knew. A beautiful building could hide ugly hearts. Standing quietly at the company gate in his faded security uniform, he had become almost invisible. Employees walked past him every day without giving him a second glance. They believed he was just another poorly paid security guard whose opinions did not matter. That was exactly what made his disguise so effective. People revealed their true character when they believed no one important was watching. Obinna adjusted his cap and greeted the first employees arriving for work. Good morning. A young engineer smiled. Morning. Another nodded politely, but several others ignored him completely. One senior manager walked past while speaking on his phone. Without looking at Obina, he waved impatiently. Open the gate. No greeting. No eye contact. No appreciation. Obina quietly opened the gate. Inside, however, he made another mental note. Respect should never depend on someone's job title. Later that morning, a delivery truck arrived carrying expensive construction materials. The driver parked near the warehouse while workers began unloading steel rods and cement. From his position near the entrance, Obina noticed something strange. The warehouse supervisor, Mr. Chikwudi, looked around carefully before whispering to two laborers. Instead of taking all the materials inside the company warehouse, they quietly loaded several bundles onto another pickup truck parked behind the building. The workers moved quickly, too quickly, as though they had done it many times before. Obina narrowed his eyes. He casually walked toward the loading area. Good morning. The supervisor frowned. What do you want? I was asked to patrol this side. We're busy. I can see. One laborer looked nervous. Mr. Chikwudi stepped closer. You don't need to concern yourself with warehouse matters. Obina smiled politely. Of course. He turned and walked away. But before leaving, he discreetly noted the registration number of the pickup truck. Something wasn't right. Very expensive building materials had just disappeared without any official documentation. During lunch break, Obina quietly sat beneath a tree near the security post. The same group of guards gathered around him. One of them sighed. I don't understand this company anymore. What happened? Obina asked. The older guard shook his head. A cleaner worked here for 10 years. They fired her yesterday. Why? She questioned one of the managers. Another guard laughed bitterly. If you're poor, your opinion doesn't matter. The words stung Obina deeply. Years ago, he had built this company to give hardworking people opportunities. Now many employees felt powerless. That was unacceptable. As they spoke, loud voices echoed from the parking lot. Several office workers had gathered around a young intern carrying a stack of files. The poor boy accidentally dropped them. Papers scattered everywhere. Instead of helping him, two senior employees burst into laughter. You can't even carry documents properly. Maybe you should go back to university. Another added loudly, they hire anybody these days. The young intern knelt quickly, trying to gather the papers before the wind carried them away. Employees walked around him as though he didn't exist. Obina immediately stood. Without saying a word, he helped collect the scattered files. The young man looked embarrassed. Thank you. It's all right. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. Together they arranged the documents neatly. As the intern hurried away, one employee left. See the security guard helping another failure. His colleagues laughed. Obina simply smiled. Kindness required no audience. That afternoon, he witnessed something even more disturbing. A middle-aged widow arrived at the company reception carrying building plans. She hoped to renovate a small block of shops she had inherited from her late husband. She wore simple clothes and looked nervous. I have an appointment, she told the receptionist. Before the receptionist could answer, a senior sales executive walked over. He looked the woman up and down. Can you even afford our services? The woman looked surprised. I came because someone recommended your company. The executive laughed. Our projects aren't for everybody. Several employees nearby smiled. The woman's face fell. I only wanted a quotation. We're busy. She slowly picked up her documents. I'm sorry for wasting your time. She walked away. Obina watched helplessly from the entrance. His heart ached. No customer should ever leave his company feeling humiliated. He quietly followed the woman outside. Madam, she turned. Yes. I'm sorry. She smiled sadly. You don't need to apologize. Our company should have treated you better. She looked surprised. You seem like a good man. I hope you find the help you need. Thank you. She walked away. Obina stood silently. That evening he instructed his personal assistant, through a secure anonymous message, to locate the woman and personally handle her project without revealing his identity. If his employees failed her, he would not. The next day brought another surprise. Obina noticed Adiz arriving earlier than usual. As always, she smiled. "Good morning, Obi." "Good morning. You look tired." "I didn't sleep much." "Long shift." He nodded. She reached into her handbag. "I brought something." She handed him a bottle of water. "You've been standing since morning. You didn't have to." "I know." She smiled warmly. "But I wanted to." Obina accepted it gratefully. "Thank you." "You always say thank you." "My mother taught me." Adiz laughed. "Mine too." She walked toward the office, leaving Obina smiling again. Simple acts of kindness seemed natural to her. She never behaved as though helping someone beneath her position was a burden. Inside the finance department, however, kindness was becoming dangerous. That afternoon, raised voices echoed through the corridor. Curious employees gathered near the accounting office. Obina quietly moved closer while pretending to patrol. Through the slightly open door, he heard a heated argument. Mr. Ease, the company's senior finance manager, slammed a file onto his desk. "I told you to process the payment." Adiz remained calm. "The figures don't match." "They don't have to." "They do." Mr. Ease lowered his voice. "Just sign it." "I can't. It's company policy." He leaned closer. "It's my instruction." She looked him directly in the eye. "And company policy comes before personal instructions." Silence filled the room. Several employees exchanged nervous glances. Mr. Ease forced a smile. "You think you're smarter than me?" "No." "Then sign." "I won't approve inaccurate records." His smile disappeared completely. "You'll regret this." Adiz quietly gathered her files. "If protecting the company's money is wrong." She paused. "Then I'm willing to face the consequences." She walked out. As she passed the hallway, many employees pretended not to notice. No one wanted to become involved. Obina watched everything. He didn't yet know what the missing money was for, but he knew one thing. Adiz had refused to compromise her integrity. Later that evening, several workers gathered in the cafeteria. Obina happened to be checking the nearby entrance when he overheard a conversation. One woman rolled her eyes. "That Adiz is too proud." Another laughed. "She thinks honesty will make her rich." Someone else whispered, "She'll lose her job soon." Another added, "Mr. Ease never forgives people who embarrass him." The group laughed quietly. Obina continued walking. So this was how corruption survived. Not because everyone participated, but because honest people stood alone while everyone else remained silent. The following Friday, another incident confirmed his growing fears. A contractor arrived carrying a gift basket. He smiled warmly at the receptionist. "I'm here to see Mr. Chiquiti." The receptionist nodded knowingly. "You brought the usual package?" The contractor smiled. "Of course." She allowed him upstairs immediately. An hour later, another contractor arrived. He carried only project documents. "No gifts?" the receptionist asked. "No. You'll need to book another appointment." "But I already have one." "I'm sorry." The man waited nearly 4 hours before being seen. Obina quietly observed the difference. Bribes were becoming normal, and those who refused to participate paid the price. As the sun began to set, employees slowly left the office. Some laughed loudly as they discussed weekend plans. Others hurried toward waiting cars. Adiz emerged carrying a small box of files. She looked exhausted. Obina noticed immediately. "Everything all right?" She smiled faintly. "I'll be okay." "You don't look okay." She hesitated. "Sometimes doing the right thing is lonely." He nodded. "I know." She looked surprised. "You do." He smiled gently. "More than you think." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Adiz sighed. "My father used to tell me something." "What was it?" "Never become rich by becoming someone you're ashamed to see in the mirror." Obina felt a lump form in his throat. Those words reminded him of the principles on which he had built his company. The very principles that many of his employees had forgotten. "You have a wise father," he said softly. "I did." She looked down briefly. "I miss him every day." I'm sorry. She forced a smile. Thank you. As she walked toward the bus stop, Obina watched her disappear into the evening crowd. Unlike many others in the company, she carried no expensive handbag, wore no flashy jewelry, and drove no luxury car. Yet she possessed something far more valuable: integrity. That night, back in his private residence, Obina removed his faded security uniform and sat alone in his study. He opened the notebook that had become the record of his undercover investigation. The pages were now filled with names, dates, dishonest transactions, acts of cruelty, and abuse of authority. Beside many names, he had written one troubling word: corrupt. But beside one name, he had written something entirely different. Adiz, honest beyond pressure, compassionate, incorruptible, protect at all costs. Obina closed the notebook slowly. His mission was becoming more dangerous than he had expected. Corruption ran deeper than a few dishonest employees. It had spread through entire departments like a disease. Yet amid all the deception, greed, and hypocrisy, one person continued to shine with quiet goodness. She did not know it, but her courage had caught the attention of the one man whose opinion could change her life forever. And somewhere in the shadows, the people she had refused to join were beginning to see her not as an honest colleague, but as an obstacle that needed to be removed. The battle between integrity and corruption had only just begun, and neither Adiz nor Obina realized how high the stakes were about to become. Nearly a month had passed since Obina Okafor exchanged his tailored designer suits for a faded security uniform. Every morning before dawn, he left his mansion in one of his ordinary vehicles parked several streets away from his company. He would change into his security uniform inside a small rented apartment that no one knew belonged to him. From there, he rode an old motorcycle to Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited, arriving before the first employee. The routine had become strangely familiar. The billionaire who once spent his mornings signing multi-million naira contracts now spent them checking visitors' identity cards, directing vehicles into the parking lot, and opening gates. Oddly enough, he had never felt more connected to his own company. From the gate, he saw everything. He saw the cleaners who arrived before sunrise to sweep the compound. He saw the security guards who worked 12-hour shifts without complaint. He saw junior employees carrying heavy files, while senior managers barked orders from the comfort of their air-conditioned offices. Most importantly, he saw people's true character. And every single day, one person continued to stand out: Adiz. She never entered the company without greeting everyone she met. Good morning, she greeted the cleaners. Good morning, she greeted the gardeners. Good morning, she greeted the receptionists. And she never forgot the security guards, especially Obi, the name everyone believed belonged to an ordinary man trying to earn a living. To Obina, those simple greetings had become the brightest part of his mornings. One Tuesday morning, dark clouds gathered over Enugu before sunrise. A heavy rainstorm had flooded several roads, causing terrible traffic throughout the city. Employees began arriving late, frustrated and soaked. Some blamed the weather. Others complained loudly. One manager stormed toward the entrance. "What kind of useless city is this?" Another grumbled, "I've been sitting in traffic for almost 2 hours." Nobody seemed to notice the security guards standing outside in the rain, their uniforms completely drenched. Obina quietly continued directing vehicles. His boots were soaked. Rainwater dripped from the edge of his cap. Still, he smiled politely at every arriving employee. Around 9 o'clock, Adiz hurried through the gate carrying a large umbrella. The moment she saw Obina standing in the rain, she frowned. "You've been standing here all this time? It's my job." "But you're completely wet." He shrugged. "I'll dry off eventually." She looked around. Nearby, several security guards stood without shelter. Meanwhile, senior managers hurried into the building, holding expensive umbrellas. Adiz shook her head. "This isn't right." Without another word, she walked toward the nearby cafeteria. A few minutes later, she returned carrying a large flask and several disposable cups. The security guards looked at her curiously. "I brought hot tea." One older guard blinked. "For us?" "Of course." You've all been standing in the rain. She poured tea into each cup. One by one, the guards accepted them gratefully. When she finally handed one to Obina, he smiled. You really didn't have to. I know. She smiled back. But kindness isn't something people should do only when they have to. Her words stayed with Obina long after she disappeared into the office. That afternoon, the rain finally stopped. The compound smelled of wet earth and fresh grass. Business slowed, giving Obina a rare opportunity to sit beneath a tree near the entrance. He quietly sipped water from a bottle when Adiz appeared carrying a small notebook. Mind if I sit here for a few minutes? He looked surprised. Not at all. She sat on the bench beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, felt peaceful. Finally, Adiz smiled. You don't talk much. Obina laughed softly. I've always been that way. I don't believe you. Oh, I think you observe people. He looked at her with curiosity. What makes you say that? You always notice things. He smiled. Is that a bad habit? No. I think it's rare. She looked toward the office building. Most people only notice those above them. You notice everyone. Obina felt a strange warmth in his chest. She had seen something about him that nobody else had. You notice people too, he replied. She smiled. I suppose I do. Their conversation gradually became easier. They spoke about Enugu, their favorite local foods, childhood memories, books, music, simple things. Adiz laughed easily. Her laughter wasn't loud. It was soft and genuine. Obina realized he hadn't laughed this much in years. Most conversations in his life revolved around money, investments, politics, contracts, profit margins, board meetings. For the first time in a very long while, he was simply talking like an ordinary person, and he enjoyed it. The following week, Obina noticed Adiz arriving unusually early. Her eyes looked tired. Dark circles had formed beneath them. As she approached the gate, he smiled. Good morning. She returned the smile, though it looked weaker than usual. Morning. You didn't sleep well? She sighed. Not really. Everything all right? She hesitated before answering. My younger brother has malaria. I'm sorry. He was admitted to a clinic last night. You stayed with him? She nodded. My sister is preparing for WEC exams, so I couldn't leave her alone either. You take care of them yourself? Yes. No relatives? She smiled sadly. Not the helpful kind. Obina remained silent. My parents died in a road accident 6 years ago. The words hit him harder than he expected. I'm sorry. It happened on their wedding anniversary. She looked toward the road. One day I had parents. The next day I became mother, father, and sister to 2 children. Obina felt his throat tighten. You've done it ever since? She nodded. My brother is 16. My sister just turned 14. They're good children. They deserve better. You've sacrificed a lot. She smiled softly. They're worth every sacrifice. For several moments, Obina couldn't speak. He had built companies, bought properties, made billions. Yet he wondered whether he possessed the same quiet strength sitting beside him. That evening, after work, Obina secretly instructed his personal assistant. Find the clinic treating Adiz's brother. Yes, sir. Pay every outstanding bill. Should I reveal who paid? No. Tell them an anonymous donor settled everything. Understood. The next morning, Adiz arrived looking confused. She greeted Obina before speaking. Something strange happened. What? The hospital bill disappeared. What do you mean? Someone paid everything. That's wonderful. She smiled. It is. I wish I knew who did it. Obina simply smiled. Sometimes God sends help through people we'll never meet. She nodded thoughtfully. I suppose you're right. Days turned into weeks. Their friendship continued growing. Every lunch break, Adiz often stopped by the security post. Sometimes she brought roasted corn. Other times meat pie. Occasionally just bottled water. They shared stories while other employees passed by staring. One afternoon, Adiz noticed an old photograph peeking from Obina's wallet. "Who's that?" He looked down. It was the only photograph he carried. His late mother. "My mother. She's beautiful." "She was. You were close." He smiled. "Very. What happened?" "She died before she could see me succeed." Adiz lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry. She taught me everything." "Like what?" "That money should never make someone forget kindness." Adiz smiled. "My father used to say almost the same thing." "What exactly?" "A rich man without compassion is poorer than the beggar he ignores." Obina laughed. "Our parents would have been friends." She laughed too. "I think they would." Not everyone appreciated their growing friendship. Inside the accounting department, gossip spread quickly. One afternoon, two female employees whispered as Adiz walked past. "There she goes. The security guard's girlfriend." The other laughed. "Imagine. A beautiful woman like her. What a waste." A third employee joined them. "Maybe he's secretly rich." The room burst into laughter. Adiz heard every word. She simply smiled and continued working. She refused to let gossip change who she was. Later that day, she found Obina arranging visitor records near the entrance. "I have a question." He looked up. "Go ahead. Can I ask something personal?" "You can." "Does it bother you when people look down on security guards?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes." "What hurts most?" He looked toward the busy parking lot. "It's not the insults. It's when people assume your dreams are small because your salary is." Adiz remained quiet. He continued. "Every person has a story. Some people simply haven't had their opportunity yet." She nodded slowly. "I agree. My father drove a taxi. He always said every honest job deserves respect." Obina smiled. "Your father was a wise man." He really was. That Friday, the company held a small birthday celebration for one of the senior managers. The conference room overflowed with expensive food. Laughter echoed throughout the building. Outside, the cleaners continued working. The security guards remained at their posts. None had been invited. As the party ended, trays of untouched food were thrown into large waste bins. Obina watched silently. Moments later, Adiz walked outside carrying several takeaway packs. She approached the security guards. "They're throwing this away. You should eat it instead." The older guard looked embarrassed. "Are you sure?" She smiled. "Food shouldn't be wasted." The guards thanked her repeatedly. As she handed one pack to Obina, he looked at her with admiration. Most people would have walked past. She stopped. She noticed. She cared. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Obina remained alone at the gate for several minutes. The compound had become quiet. Streetlights illuminated the empty parking lot. He leaned against the security booth and stared at the office building. He had started this mission to uncover corruption. He had expected dishonesty. He had expected greed. He had expected abuse of power. He had found all of those things. But he had also found something unexpected. Peace. Every conversation with Adiz reminded him that genuine goodness still existed. She didn't know he owned the company. She didn't know he was one of Nigeria's wealthiest businessmen. She wasn't trying to impress him. She simply valued people for who they were. That night, back in his mansion, Obina sat alone on the balcony overlooking the city lights of Enugu. His phone buzzed continuously with messages from business associates, politicians, and investors. He ignored them all. Instead, he found himself thinking about a young accountant who rode public buses, cared for her younger siblings, and still found time to show kindness to everyone around her. He smiled to himself. For years, many women had claimed to love him. Some admired his private jet. Others admired his bank account. Many admired his famous name. But Adiz admired none of those things because she knew nothing about them. She liked Obi, the quiet security guard. For the first time in years, Obina felt something stirring deep within his heart. Something no business deal, luxury mansion, or billionaire contract had ever given him. Hope. He still didn't know what the future held, but one thing had become clear. What began as an undercover investigation was slowly becoming something far more personal. Without realizing it, the billionaire and the humble accountant were no longer just exchanging greetings at the company gate. They were becoming friends. And sometimes, the strongest love stories begin with nothing more than a simple good morning. By the 6th week of Obina's undercover mission, one thing had become impossible to ignore. The friendship between Obi, the quiet security guard, and Adiz, the young accountant, had become the favorite topic of gossip throughout Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited. It seemed that everyone had an opinion. Some found it amusing. Some found it ridiculous. Others believed Adiz had lost her mind. But neither Obina nor Adiz paid much attention to the whispers. To them, they were simply two people who enjoyed each other's company. Every morning began the same way. As soon as Adiz stepped through the company gate, her eyes searched for the familiar figure in the faded security uniform. The moment she saw him, her face brightened. "Good morning, Obi." "Good morning, Adiz. How was your night?" "It was peaceful." "And yours?" She smiled. "My brother finally went back to school." "That's wonderful." "It is." Those conversations rarely lasted more than 2 or 3 minutes. Yet they became the happiest part of both their mornings. For Obina, those brief moments made him forget Billionaire contracts, company scandals, and the corruption he was secretly investigating. For Adiz, talking to Obi reminded her that kindness still existed in a world that often seemed cold. One Monday morning, Obina noticed Adiz struggling with a heavy carton of accounting files. Without hesitation, he hurried toward her. "Let me help," she smiled. "I can manage." "I know you can. But you shouldn't have to." She laughed softly. "You're stubborn." "So I've been told." Together they carried the files into the reception area. As they passed the finance department, several employees watched them. One woman folded her arms. "Would you look at that?" Another rolled her eyes. "The security guard is carrying her files again." A third laughed loudly. "They look like husband and wife." The room erupted with laughter. Adiz heard every word. She simply thanked Obina. "I appreciate the help." "Anytime." She walked calmly into her office without responding to the gossip. Her silence only frustrated those hoping to embarrass her. Inside the finance department, the teasing continued. One afternoon during lunch, 3 female accountants surrounded Adiz. One of them grinned mischievously. "So?" Adiz looked up from her lunch. "So? When is the wedding?" She frowned. "What wedding?" "You and the security guard." The others burst into laughter. Another added, "Will the reception be held at the security post?" More laughter filled the room. Adiz calmly took a sip of water before answering. "You people seem very interested in my personal life." "We're just worried." "Worried?" One woman nodded dramatically. "You're beautiful, educated. You have a good job. You could marry a doctor, or an engineer, or even a wealthy businessman." Instead, another woman said mockingly, "You're always smiling at a security guard." Adiz looked at each of them before speaking. "Can I ask all of you a question?" They exchanged curious glances. "What kind of question?" "If someone is kind." She paused. "Does their job make them less worthy of respect?" Silence. No one answered. She continued quietly. "Obi has never insulted anyone. He greets everyone politely. He helps people without expecting anything. I've seen managers with expensive cars behave far worse." The room became uncomfortable. Finally, one woman scoffed. "Kindness doesn't pay bills." Adiz smiled gently. "No, but character builds families." She stood up, picked up her lunchbox, and walked away. The room remained silent long after she left. Later that day, Obina overheard the entire conversation while checking visitor records nearby. He felt both grateful and humbled. She had defended him without knowing he was actually wealthier than every manager in the building. She believed he was an ordinary man earning an ordinary salary. Yet she saw value in him. Not because of money, because of character. That realization stayed with him for the rest of the day. That evening, as employees left the office, Adiz found Obinna locking one of the side gates. "You look thoughtful." He smiled. "Do I?" Something happened. He hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why are you always kind to me?" She looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "You know what people say. They laugh. They judge you. They think you're wasting your time talking to a security guard." She smiled softly. "Do you know something my father taught me?" "What?" He said, "Never allow society to tell you the value of another human being." She leaned against the fence. "When I was little, my father stopped our car every Christmas." "For what?" "To share food with security guards working during the holidays." Obinna listened quietly. "He used to tell us." She smiled as she remembered. "The man protecting your gate deserves respect before the man sitting behind it." Obinna felt his chest tighten. "He sounds like an extraordinary man." He was. She looked toward the road. "I miss him every day. I can tell." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she smiled again. "Besides." "Yes. You've been a good friend." Obinna looked at her. "A friend." She nodded. "You listen. You never interrupt. You never judge. You always encourage people. I think the world needs more people like you." She waved goodbye. "See you tomorrow." As she walked away, Obinna remained standing exactly where he was. He had received countless compliments during his life. People praised his intelligence, his success, his wealth, his business skills. But somehow, being called a good friend meant more than all of them. Meanwhile, trouble was quietly beginning to grow. Mr. Ease had started paying close attention to Adiz. He had not forgotten that she refused to approve the suspicious financial documents weeks earlier. One afternoon, he called another manager into his office. "Close the door." The man obeyed. Mr. Ease leaned back in his chair. "Adiz is becoming a problem." "Because of the financial records?" "Exactly. She asks too many questions." "What do you want to do?" Mr. Ease smiled coldly. "If someone refuses to bend." He slowly tapped his desk. "They eventually break." Neither of them noticed the cleaner quietly mopping the corridor outside. She heard every word. The following morning, the cleaner found Obinna near the staff entrance. She looked around nervously. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." "I think they're planning something against that accountant." "Adiz?" She nodded. "I don't know what, but I overheard Mr. Ease." "What did he say?" "He wants to destroy her." Obinna thanked her. His expression remained calm, but inside, alarm bells were ringing. He had expected retaliation. He simply hadn't expected it this soon. Later that week, Adiz arrived looking exhausted once again. "You've been working too hard," Obinna said. She laughed. "I've heard that 3 times this week. Maybe you should listen." "I wish I could." "What happened?" She sighed. "My landlord increased our rent. I'm trying to save enough money before next month." "I'm sorry." She shrugged. "Life goes on. You always smile." She looked at him. "Not always. It just helps." "Helps what?" "Carrying heavy burdens." Obinna admired her resilience. Despite every challenge she faced, she refused to become bitter. That Friday, the company organized a customer appreciation event. Employees dressed elegantly. Music played through large speakers. Tables overflowed with delicious food. Guests filled the conference hall. Security guards remained outside under the hot afternoon sun. Obinna watched as expensive cars arrived one after another. Suddenly, he noticed an elderly woman struggling to climb the front staircase. She leaned heavily on her walking stick. Several employees walked past her. None offered assistance. Without hesitation, Obinna hurried over. "Let me help you." The woman smiled gratefully. "Thank you, son." He slowly helped her climb each step. Unknown to everyone present, the elderly woman happened to be one of the company's oldest shareholders. From a distance, Adiz watched the scene with admiration. "So that's who he really is," she whispered to herself. "Not a security guard. not merely an employee, a genuinely compassionate man. After the event ended, Adiz found Obinna arranging traffic cones outside. "I saw what you did." "What?" "The elderly woman." He shrugged. "Anyone would have helped." She smiled knowingly. "No, not everyone." She looked directly into his eyes. "You never do kind things because people are watching. You do them because that's who you are." Obinna struggled to respond. No one had understood him so completely in years. That night, after returning to his mansion, Obinna walked into his private study. The room overlooked the sparkling lights of Enugu. His phone buzzed repeatedly with business updates. He ignored every notification. Instead, he opened a leather journal that he rarely used. It was the same journal where he wrote his most personal thoughts. He stared at the blank page for several moments before picking up his pen. For the first time in years, his thoughts had nothing to do with business. He slowly began to write. "Today Adiz defended me again. She believes I am only a security guard. She has nothing to gain from being kind to me. Yet she continues to treat me with respect." He paused. Then he wrote the words he had been trying to deny for days. "I think I am falling in love with her." He placed the pen down and leaned back in his chair. The realization both excited and frightened him. He had spent years avoiding relationships because he never knew whether people loved him or his fortune. With Adiz, things were different. She knew nothing about his wealth, nothing about his mansions, nothing about the luxury cars parked in his garage, nothing about the billions in his bank accounts. She had only met Obi, the humble security guard, and somehow, she still saw a man worth respecting. Obinna smiled to himself. For the first time since beginning his undercover mission, he realized that he had discovered something far more valuable than evidence of corruption. He had found someone who looked beyond appearances and saw the heart beneath them. Yet as his feelings for Adiz deepened, another battle was quietly unfolding inside the company. Hidden behind polished smiles and expensive suits, corrupt managers were growing increasingly determined to silence the one accountant who refused to compromise her integrity. Neither Obinna nor Adiz knew it yet, but the love slowly blossoming between them was about to be tested by betrayal, lies, and a conspiracy that threatened not only Adiz's career, but everything Obinna had worked so hard to protect. The first signs of trouble appeared on an ordinary Wednesday morning. The sun had barely risen over Enugu when Obinna, still disguised as the security guard everyone knew as Obi, arrived at the company gate. As usual, he greeted the cleaners, checked the security logbook, and helped direct the first vehicles into the compound. Everything looked normal. Employees hurried into the building carrying laptops and folders. Gardeners watered the flowers lining the driveway. The receptionists arranged fresh flowers at the front desk. But Obinna had learned something important during the past 2 months. The most dangerous storms often began on calm mornings. As he stood at his post, his eyes drifted toward the finance department on the second floor. Through the large glass windows, he could see Mr. Ease standing with 2 other senior managers. They were talking quietly. Every few seconds, they glanced toward Adiz's office. Obinna frowned. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Around 9 o'clock, Adiz arrived at the company. As always, she smiled warmly. "Good morning, Obi." "Good morning. You look worried." He quickly forced a smile. "Just thinking." "About what?" He hesitated. "Be careful today." Adiz looked puzzled. "Why?" "I don't know. I just have a feeling." She laughed softly. "You sound like my grandmother." "Maybe your grandmother is wise." She smiled. "I'll be fine." She adjusted the files in her arms and walked toward the building. Obinna watched her disappear through the glass doors. His instincts had rarely failed him in business. Today, they told him that danger was coming. Inside the finance department, Adiz settled into her desk and began reviewing payment requests from various contractors. She always followed the same routine. Check the supporting documents. Verify the figures. Confirm approvals. Only then would she authorize payment. It was one of the reasons many employees respected her. It was also the reason corrupt managers hated her. At exactly 10 o'clock, Mr. Ease appeared at her office door. Adiz. She looked up. Good morning, sir. I need those payment approvals immediately. She reached for the files. I've almost finished reviewing them. No need. I've already checked everything. She looked surprised. Sir, company policy requires independent verification. Mr. Ease smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I'm your supervisor. I know. So my approval is enough. Adiz opened the file again. Something immediately caught her attention. The invoice requested payment for 200 tons of steel rods delivered to a construction site in Succa. She frowned. The delivery report attached to the invoice listed only 120 tons. The numbers didn't match. She looked back at Mr. Ease. Sir. What? There's a discrepancy. There isn't. The delivery records say 120 tons. The invoice says 200. Mr. Ease folded his arms. Just sign it. Adiz remained calm. I can't. His smile disappeared. I wasn't asking. I'm sorry, but I can't authorize payment for materials that weren't delivered. Mr. Ease leaned closer. Do you enjoy making my job difficult? No, sir. Then sign. I won't. The office became silent. Finally, Mr. Ease grabbed the file from her desk. We'll discuss this later. He walked away without another word. Adiz slowly exhaled. She had no idea that the trap had already been set. Later that afternoon, Obinna was patrolling near the warehouse when he noticed something unusual. Two men were carrying sealed document boxes from the finance department. Instead of taking them to the archive room, they quietly entered a storage office rarely used by anyone. Curious, Obinna walked closer. The door was slightly open. Inside, he heard voices. It's tonight. What about the records? We'll replace them. And the accountant? Mr. Ease laughed softly. Tomorrow she'll wish she'd signed those papers. Obinna's heart began beating faster. He carefully stepped away before anyone noticed him. Whatever they were planning involved Adiz. He needed proof, not suspicions. Proof. That evening, after most employees had gone home, Obinna secretly returned to the company through a private entrance known only to him and the chairman of the board. He changed into ordinary clothes to avoid being recognized by the night guards. Moving quietly through the dark corridors, he made his way toward the finance department. The building was almost silent. Only the sound of air conditioners filled the empty hallways. Using his master access card, he entered the finance records room. Immediately, something caught his attention. Several files had been moved. He remembered their exact arrangement. Now they were different. Someone had replaced original payment records with new documents. He opened one file. His expression darkened. Several signatures had been copied. Dates had been altered. Payment figures had been increased. This wasn't simple accounting fraud. Someone was systematically stealing millions of naira from the company. And based on the new paperwork, it looked as though Adiz had approved everything. Obinna clenched his jaw. They're framing her. He immediately photographed every altered document using a secure encrypted phone. Then he carefully returned everything exactly as he had found it. Whoever was behind this believed their plan was perfect. They had no idea the owner of the company had just discovered it. The next morning began like every other. Employees greeted one another. Coffee filled the offices with its rich aroma. Phones rang constantly. Customers waited in reception. Nothing suggested disaster was only minutes away. At exactly 10:30, loud footsteps echoed through the finance department. Mr. Ease entered, followed by two internal auditors. Adiz. She stood immediately. Yes, sir. We need to inspect your records. Of course. The auditors opened several files. Within seconds, one of them frowned. These payment approvals. Another looked shocked. Millions of naira are missing. The room became silent. Employees slowly stood from their desks. Adiz looked confused. What do you mean? The auditor placed several documents on the desk. These approvals carry your signature. She stared at them. No, I've never signed these. Mr. Ease folded his arms. The signatures appear genuine. They're not. You approved payments for materials that never arrived. I didn't. The second auditor shook his head. The records say otherwise. Adi's hands trembled as she examined the documents. Someone had copied her signature perfectly. Her approval stamp had also been duplicated. This is impossible. Mr. Ease sighed dramatically. I trusted you. So did all of us. Tears filled Adi's eyes. I didn't do this. Several employees whispered among themselves. I knew something was wrong. She always acted too perfect. I can't believe she stole company money. Others remained silent. Not because they believed she was guilty, because they feared speaking against management. Outside, Obinna heard the commotion and hurried inside. From the hallway, he watched everything unfold. Every accusation, every lie, every tear rolling down Adi's face. His fists tightened. Every instinct told him to walk into the room and reveal himself immediately. He wanted to shout. He wanted to expose every corrupt manager standing there. He wanted to end the deception. But he stopped himself. If he revealed his identity now, he would save Adi's. But the larger corruption network would disappear before he could expose everyone involved. He needed patience. Justice required evidence, not anger. The lead auditor finally spoke. Until this investigation is complete, he looked at Adi's. You are suspended without pay. The words struck the room like thunder. Adi's stared at him. Suspended. Effective immediately. You must surrender your access card. She slowly removed it from around her neck. Her hands shook so badly that she almost dropped it. One of her co-workers quietly began crying. Another looked away. Even those who disliked Adi's knew something felt wrong. She had always been the most honest person in the department. As she packed her few belongings into a cardboard box, no one knew what to say. One by one, employees returned to their desks. Nobody wanted to be seen comforting the accused accountant. Nobody, except one person. Outside the building, Adi's walked slowly toward the gate carrying the small cardboard box that now held everything she had left at work. Family photographs, coffee mug, a notebook, a few pens. Months of dedication reduced to one small box. Obinna met her near the security post. Neither of them spoke immediately. Finally, he asked quietly, "What happened?" She tried to smile. It didn't last. "They say I stole from the company." "I know you didn't." She looked at him with surprise. "You believe me?" Without question. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "I'm scared, Obi. My brother's school fees. My sister. My rent." She couldn't finish the sentence. Obinna gently took the box from her hands. "You won't face this alone." She looked at him. "They've taken everything." "No." He smiled softly. "They've only taken your job. They can never take your integrity." She broke down crying. For several minutes, she simply stood there while Obinna silently comforted her. He wished more than anything that he could tell her the truth. That he owned the company. That he already knew she was innocent. That he would fix everything. But the time wasn't right. Not yet. That evening, Obinna returned to his mansion more determined than ever. Inside his private office, he spread dozens of documents across a large conference table. Photographs, financial records, vehicle registration numbers, copies of altered invoices, names of suspicious employees. He connected pieces that had seemed unrelated weeks earlier. The missing construction materials, the fake supplier invoices, the warehouse thefts, the bribed contractors, the forged signatures. Everything pointed to one organized criminal network operating inside his own company. And now they had made one fatal mistake. They had framed the only innocent accountant in the department. Obinna looked out the window toward the glowing lights of Enugu. His expression hardened. They think they've won. He quietly closed the investigation file. They have no idea who they're fighting. For the first time since beginning his undercover mission, the billionaire was no longer simply observing. He was preparing to strike. And when he finally revealed himself, every lie, every stolen naira, and every act of betrayal would come crashing down like a building whose rotten foundation had finally been exposed. The conspirators believed they had buried the truth forever. Instead, they had awakened the man who built the company from nothing, and who would stop at nothing to protect the woman he was rapidly falling in love with. The suspension of Adiz changed everything. For the first time since Obinna began working undercover as the security guard everyone knew as Obi, the company no longer felt the same. The cheerful good morning that had brightened his days was gone. The accountant who had greeted the cleaners, shared meals with security guards, and smiled at everyone she met was no longer walking through the company gate. The silence left behind was impossible to ignore. Every morning, Obinna found himself instinctively looking toward the entrance around 8 o'clock, expecting to see Adiz walking in with her handbag and warm smile. But she never came. Instead, employees whispered among themselves whenever they passed the security post. "I heard she stole over 50 million naira. They say the evidence is overwhelming. I always thought she acted too innocent." Others were less convinced. "I don't believe it." "Neither do I. She was the most honest person in finance." But who would challenge management? No one wanted to risk becoming the next target. Fear had settled over the company like a heavy cloud. Obinna listened carefully to every conversation. The suspension had achieved exactly what the corrupt managers wanted. Honest employees had become afraid to speak. Inside his mansion that evening, Obinna spent hours studying the evidence he had secretly gathered. His dining table had become an investigation center. Files covered every inch of the polished wood. Photographs, invoices, delivery records, warehouse logs, bank transfers, employee attendance sheets. He circled names with a red marker. Mr. Ease, Mr. Chikwudi, 3 warehouse supervisors, 2 procurement officers, 1 receptionist, even 1 internal auditor. The fraud reached much deeper than he had imagined. Millions of naira had disappeared over the past 3 years. Construction materials had been stolen. Fake contractors had received payments. Company equipment had been sold privately. Every scheme relied on one simple fact. Nobody questioned senior management, except Adiz. That was why they had framed her. She had become dangerous simply by refusing to sign dishonest documents. Obinna closed the file. They won't get away with this. The following morning, he returned to work wearing the same faded security uniform. His wealthy lifestyle disappeared the moment he stepped through the staff entrance. Again he became Obi, the quiet security guard. As he resumed his post, one of the older guards approached him. "You've heard." "What?" "They're saying that accountant confessed." Obinna frowned. "Who said so?" "One of the supervisors." "Did anyone actually hear her confess?" The guard shook his head. "No. It's just what people are saying." Obinna nodded thoughtfully. "Rumors. The oldest weapon used by dishonest people. Repeat a lie often enough, and eventually some people begin believing it." Later that morning, Obinna noticed something unusual near the loading bay. Mr. Chikwudi stood speaking with a contractor beside a white pickup truck. Instead of using the company warehouse, several expensive electrical generators were being loaded directly into the contractor's vehicle. There were no official delivery papers, no warehouse documentation, no inventory officer present. Everything was happening too quickly. Obinna walked toward them. "Good morning." Mr. Chikwudi immediately frowned. "What do you want now?" "I noticed company property leaving the premises. We've already cleared it. Can I see the authorization?" The supervisor stepped closer. "Since when do security guards inspect management decisions?" "I was only doing my job. My job is to ensure nothing leaves the compound without approval." The contractor looked uncomfortable. Mr. Chikwudi's voice hardened. "I said everything is approved." "By whom?" "By me." Obinna remained calm. "I'll need the paperwork for the gate records." For a brief moment, neither man spoke. Finally, Mr. Chikwudi forced a smile. "I'll bring it later. I'm afraid company policy requires it before the vehicle exits." Several workers nearby stopped to watch. The tension was obvious. Finally, Mr. Chikwudi turned to the contractor. Unload everything. The contractor looked shocked. But, I said unload it. As the workers reluctantly removed the generators from the pickup truck, Mr. Chiquiti glared at Obina. This isn't over. Obina simply saluted politely. I'm only following company policy. The supervisor stormed away. But inside, Obina knew something important. He had just interrupted another theft. And the corrupt managers had noticed. That afternoon, inside the executive lounge, Mr. Ease slammed a folder onto the table. Who stopped the shipment? Mr. Chiquiti answered angrily. That useless security guard. The new one? Yes. He keeps asking questions. Another manager frowned. He's becoming a problem. Mr. Ease leaned back. Have any of you noticed something? What? He always appears wherever something goes wrong. Silence filled the room. One procurement officer spoke quietly. It's almost as though. He hesitated. He knows. Mr. Ease slowly nodded. I've been thinking the same thing. The room became quiet again. Finally, he spoke. We need to find out who this man really is. From that day forward, Obina noticed subtle changes. Employees who had ignored him before now watched him carefully. Conversations stopped whenever he approached. Managers lowered their voices as he walked past. The atmosphere had changed. Someone was becoming suspicious. That evening, as he prepared to leave work, one of the cleaners quietly approached him. Obi. Yes. She looked around nervously. Be careful. Why? I overheard something. What? They're asking questions about you. What kind of questions? They want to know where you live, who your friends are. They think you're spying on them. Obina smiled reassuringly. Thank you. She lowered her voice even further. I don't trust those men. Neither do I. 2 days later, the trap was set. Around lunchtime, a contractor arrived carrying several expensive gift bags. He walked directly toward the security post. Officer, good afternoon. I have something for you. He placed one of the bags on the desk. Obina looked inside. Bundles of cash. At least 5 million naira. What is this? A small appreciation. For what? The contractor smiled. For being cooperative. I'm afraid I don't understand. The man leaned closer. We're friends. I don't think we've met before. You don't need to ask questions every time materials leave the company. Obina slowly closed the bag. I can't accept this. The contractor laughed. Everyone accepts. I don't. Take it. No. It's only money. Obina gently pushed the bag back across the desk. I'm a security guard. My duty is to protect company property. The contractor's smile disappeared. You'll regret refusing. I can live with that. Without another word, the man picked up the bag and walked away. Hidden inside a nearby office, Mr. Ease had watched everything through the window. His face darkened. You see, he muttered. No ordinary security guard refuses 5 million naira. The following week brought something even worse. One Friday evening, after most employees had left, Obina finished his shift and began walking toward the motorcycle he used for work. The parking lot was almost empty. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind him. Before he could turn, someone struck him hard across the back with a wooden stick. Pain shot through his body. He stumbled forward. 3 masked men surrounded him. You ask too many questions. Another punch landed against his ribs. One man grabbed his shirt. This is your warning. They threw him to the ground. Mind your business. If you value your life. One final kick landed before the men ran into the darkness. Obina lay on the pavement for several moments. Blood trickled from a cut above his eyebrow. His side throbbed painfully. Slowly he sat up. He could have called the police. He could have revealed his identity immediately. Instead, he smiled despite the pain. They're afraid. That realization mattered more than the injuries. People attacked only when they feared exposure. The next morning, Obina reported for work as usual. A bandage covered the cut above his eye. One security guard looked shocked. What happened? I slipped. The older man laughed. You expect me to believe that? Obina smiled. I've had worse. Although he tried to hide the pain, every movement reminded him of the attack. Still, he refused to stay home. His investigation was too important. Around noon, an unexpected visitor arrived at the company gate. Adiz. She wasn't there to return to work. She carried documents requested by the auditors investigating her suspension. The moment she saw the bandage on Obina's forehead, she hurried over. What happened to you? He smiled. It's nothing. She frowned. That doesn't look like nothing. I'll heal. She looked closely at the bruises on his face. Someone did this. He avoided her eyes. I've been in worse situations. Tell me the truth. He remained silent. She sighed. You don't have to protect me from worrying. Obina smiled gently. I'm all right. She shook her head. No. You always say you're all right. But people who are always helping others rarely admit when they're hurting. Her words caught him off guard. She reached into her handbag and removed a small packet. I brought antiseptic cream. You should use it. You remembered? Of course. She handed him the packet. I know you're strong. But even strong people deserve someone who cares. For a moment, Obina couldn't speak. Her own life was falling apart. She was unemployed. She was being investigated for a crime she didn't commit. She had younger siblings depending on her. Yet she still found time to worry about him. He looked at her with admiration. Adiz. Yes. Thank you. She smiled. You've thanked me enough for one lifetime. She handed the documents to the receptionist and slowly walked away. Obina watched until she disappeared beyond the company gate. The corrupt managers had tried to destroy her reputation. Instead, they had only revealed the strength of her character. That evening, Obina returned to his mansion bruised but determined. He entered the private investigation room where every piece of evidence was carefully organized. The attack had confirmed his suspicions. The corrupt network knew he was getting close. Very close. He picked up a fresh folder and wrote across the front in bold letters. Final phase. He no longer needed more proof of corruption. Now he needed proof that would stand before shareholders, auditors, the police, and the courts. He quietly looked out over the city lights of Enugu. The company he had built with honesty had been poisoned by greed. Its employees had forgotten that every brick of its success rested on integrity. But not for much longer. The men who believed they had silenced Adiz had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the quiet security guard standing at the company gate. Soon, they would discover that the man they had mocked, bribed, and beaten was not merely a guard protecting the entrance. He was the billionaire owner of the entire company. And when the truth finally came to light, the masks they had worn for years would be torn away forever. Their empire of lies was already beginning to crumble, and the day of reckoning was drawing closer with every passing hour. The morning of the annual shareholders' meeting dawned bright and clear over Enugu. Unlike an ordinary workday, the headquarters of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited buzzed with unusual excitement. Luxury vehicles rolled through the gates one after another. Members of the board of directors, investors from Lagos and Abuja, government officials, contractors, and business partners all arrived dressed in their finest suits. The company's largest conference hall had been transformed for the occasion. Rows of elegant chairs faced a wide stage decorated with blue and gold banners bearing the company's logo. Fresh flowers lined the front of the hall, while large projection screens displayed the words, Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited, Annual Shareholders Meeting. Employees hurried around making final preparations. Receptionists welcomed guests with bright smiles. Caterers arranged refreshments. Technicians tested microphones and projectors. To everyone present, it looked like another successful corporate event. Only one man knew that before the day ended, the company would never be the same again. Standing outside at the main gate, wearing the same faded security uniform he had worn for nearly 2 months, was Obina. To the employees, he was still simply Obi, the quiet security guard. But hidden inside his small security office was a neatly pressed charcoal suit, polished black shoes, and the identity he had hidden for weeks. Today, the disguise would finally end. Throughout the morning, Obina carefully observed the arriving guests. Several senior managers laughed confidently as they welcomed shareholders. Mr. Ease moved through the crowd with his usual arrogant smile. Mr. Chikwudi joked with contractors as though nothing had happened. Neither man showed the slightest sign of fear. They believed they had succeeded. Adiz had been suspended. The missing money had been blamed on her. The company owner had never questioned their version of events. Everything seemed perfect. Mr. Ease even laughed quietly as he passed the security post. "Open the gate, Obi." Obina smiled politely. "Yes, sir." As the gate swung open, he looked directly into the man's eyes. "Enjoy the meeting." Mr. Ease smirked. "I certainly will." He walked away without another glance. Obina watched him disappear into the building. "You won't enjoy how it ends," he whispered to himself. At exactly 10 o'clock, the conference hall filled to capacity. More than 400 people occupied the seats. Employees sat according to department. Managers occupied the front rows. Shareholders sat near the stage. Television cameras had been invited to cover the event. The chairman of the board stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the room fell silent. "Welcome to our annual shareholders meeting." Polite applause echoed through the hall. He spoke about the company's achievements over the past year. Record profits, new construction projects, awards, expansion plans. The audience applauded enthusiastically. Mr. Ease smiled proudly. Everything appeared to be going according to plan. Then the chairman paused. "There is one final matter before we conclude." He looked toward the entrance. "I would like to invite our founder and owner to address everyone." Employees immediately began looking around. Several whispered among themselves. "I thought Mr. Okafor wasn't attending." "So did I. I've never even seen him in person." Near the back of the hall, the large entrance doors slowly opened. Everyone turned. Silence spread across the room. Standing at the doorway was Obi, still wearing his faded security uniform. Several employees laughed quietly. One manager frowned. "Has the security guard entered the wrong hall?" Another whispered, "Someone should remove him." Mr. Ease shook his head in irritation. "What is that fool doing?" The chairman smiled warmly. "Please come forward." Obina began walking calmly toward the stage. Employees stared in confusion. Some laughed. Others looked embarrassed. One supervisor hurried toward him. "You're not supposed to be here." Obina smiled. "I was invited." "By whom?" "The chairman." The supervisor froze. Slowly, Obina continued walking until he reached the steps leading to the stage. The chairman personally walked down to meet him. To everyone's astonishment, the elderly chairman bowed his head respectfully. "Good morning, sir." A gasp swept through the audience. Mr. Ease's smile sapped. The chairman turned toward the crowd. "I would like everyone to welcome." He paused dramatically. "The founder, chairman emeritus, and sole majority owner of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited." He looked proudly at Obina. "Mr. Obina Okafor." The hall exploded with shocked voices. "What? Impossible. The security guard? No. It can't be." Several employees stood to their feet. Others covered their mouths in disbelief. One receptionist nearly dropped her notebook. The older security guards stared in complete shock. Mr. Chikwidi's face turned pale. Mr. Ease looked as though all the blood had drained from his body. Obina quietly removed his faded security cap. Then he slowly took off the worn security jacket. A member of the board stepped forward carrying a garment bag. Inside was the charcoal suit. Obina disappeared briefly behind a privacy screen at the side of the stage. Less than 2 minutes later, he emerged transformed. The humble security guard was gone. Standing before the audience was the confident billionaire they had only seen in newspapers and magazines. Perfectly dressed, calm, dignified, the hall fell completely silent. Eared instantly, Obina approached the microphone. For several moments, he simply looked around the room. His eyes rested on every department, every manager, every employee. every cleaner, every security guard. Finally, he spoke. "Good morning." No one answered. Many were too shocked to speak. He smiled gently. "For the past 8 weeks." He paused. "I have had the privilege of working as a security guard in my own company." A wave of whispers swept through the hall. "I wanted to see this company through the eyes of those people we often overlook." He looked toward the cleaners. "The people who sweep our floors." He looked toward the security guards. "The people who protect our gates." He looked toward the junior staff. "The people whose names many managers never bothered to learn." His voice became more serious. "What I discovered broke my heart." The room remained silent. I saw customers judged by their clothing. I saw employees insulted because of their positions. I saw honest workers bullied. I saw corruption. I saw theft. I saw bribery. Every sentence made the managers increasingly uncomfortable. Then Obinna looked directly at Mr. Ease. "And I saw innocent people blamed for crimes they did not commit." Mr. Ease lowered his eyes. Obinna nodded toward the technician at the side of the hall. "Please begin." The large projector screen behind him came to life. A video appeared. It showed warehouse workers secretly removing construction materials at night. Gasps echoed through the room. Another clip followed. Mr. Chikwudi accepted cash from a contractor. Then another. Mr. Ease instructed an employee to alter financial records. Another video showed forged signatures being placed onto payment documents. The audience watched in stunned silence. One shareholder slowly stood. "My God!" The videos continued. Secret recordings, photographs, copies of altered invoices, vehicle registration numbers, bank transfer records. Every piece of evidence Obinna had gathered during his undercover mission appeared on the screen. There was no denying it. The corruption was undeniable. Then the final image appeared. Adi's forged approval documents. Obinna looked toward the audience. "The woman accused of stealing company funds." He paused. "Is completely innocent." Employees exchanged shocked looks. He continued. "The signatures were forged. The evidence was manufactured. The accusations were planned weeks in advance." He turned toward Mr. Ease. "By members of senior management." Mr. Ease suddenly stood. "This is a misunderstanding." Obinna calmly raised one hand. The side doors of the conference hall opened immediately. More than 20 police officers entered the room. Behind them came officials from the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. The room erupted in panic. Mr. Chikwudi tried to leave. 2 officers stopped him. Mr. Ease attempted to protest. An EFCC officer stepped forward. "Mr. Ease, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, forgery, theft, and criminal breach of trust." Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Several other managers were arrested one after another. Employees watched in complete silence. Some cried. Others simply stared. The men they had feared for years were being led away. Once the arrests were complete, Obinna returned to the microphone. "I know many of you are frightened." He looked across the hall. "If you remained honest." His voice softened. "You have nothing to fear." Several junior employees visibly relaxed. He continued. "This company was never built on greed. It was built on integrity. My late parents taught me that every worker deserves dignity." He looked toward the security guards seated at the back. "I failed to notice that many of you had stopped receiving that dignity. I apologize." The words stunned everyone. The billionaire owner was apologizing to his employees. Not because he had committed the wrongdoing, but because he had allowed it to happen under his leadership. Just then, the chairman stood once more. "There is one final guest." The entrance doors opened again. Adiz walked slowly into the conference hall. She had received a mysterious invitation earlier that morning requesting her presence. She had no idea why. The moment she entered, hundreds of people turned toward her. She looked confused. Then her eyes found Obinna, or rather, the man she knew as Obi, standing on stage in an expensive suit. She froze. The cardboard invitation slipped from her fingers. Her lips trembled. "Obi?" Obina stepped down from the stage. Slowly, he walked toward her. Every person in the hall watched in complete silence. When he finally stood before her, he smiled gently. "I'm sorry." Fresh tears filled Adi's eyes. "You." She struggled to find words. "You own the company?" He nodded. "I do." "You were the security guard." She covered her mouth. "I don't understand." "I'll explain everything." He looked around the hall before speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This woman never stole from this company. She protected it, while others chased wealth." He smiled proudly. "She chose honesty." Thunderous applause suddenly filled the hall. Employees stood to their feet. Security guards clapped. Cleaners wiped away tears. Even several shareholders joined the standing ovation. Adiz stood frozen, overwhelmed by everything happening around her. Her reputation had been restored. The truth had finally won. And the man she had come to care for, the humble security guard she believed earned barely enough to survive, was actually the billionaire owner whose courage had exposed one of the largest corruption scandals in the company's history. But even as the applause echoed through the hall, another storm was quietly forming inside her heart. She was grateful. She was relieved. Yet beneath those emotions lay one painful question she could not ignore. If Obi had hidden something this enormous from her, how much of the man she had come to trust had been real? The truth had set her free. Now it threatened to test the very foundation of the love that had quietly blossomed between them. The thunderous applause that filled the conference hall slowly faded into an uneasy silence. Moments earlier, everyone had been celebrating the exposure of corruption inside Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited. Now they were witnessing something they never expected. Several senior managers, the same men who had once walked proudly through the company giving orders, were being escorted out of the hall in handcuffs. Their expensive suits and polished shoes could no longer hide the shame on their faces. Employees watched without saying a word. Some lowered their heads. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Many still struggled to accept what had just happened. Mr. Ease, who had terrorized the finance department for years, tried one last time to save himself. "This is a mistake," he shouted as officers led him toward the exit. "I've served this company faithfully." An EFCC officer stopped walking and looked directly at him. "Faithfully." He held up a thick file. "This contains evidence of over 3 years of fraud, forged documents, illegal payments, and theft." Mr. Ease's face fell. The officer continued, "You'll have an opportunity to explain everything in court." Without another word, they escorted him outside. One by one, the other corrupt managers followed. The conference hall remained silent until the doors finally closed behind them. For the first time in years, the building felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had finally been lifted. Obina returned to the stage. He looked at the frightened faces before him. He understood exactly what they were thinking. If senior executives could be arrested so suddenly, what would happen to everyone else? He adjusted the microphone. "I know many of you are afraid." Several employees nodded quietly. "But let me make one thing very clear." He paused. "If you have been honest," he smiled reassuringly, "today is not the day to fear." A few relieved smiles appeared throughout the hall. This investigation was never about punishing innocent people. It was about protecting them. His words slowly eased the tension. Then he continued, "Over the past 2 months, I have seen extraordinary acts of kindness." He looked toward the back of the hall. "I saw cleaners helping visitors who ignored them. I saw junior staff staying late to finish projects. I saw security guards working in heavy rain without complaint." He smiled warmly. "I also saw many of you quietly doing the right thing even when nobody noticed." Several employees exchanged emotional glances. No one had ever praised them publicly before. The chairman stood beside Obina. "I believe the owner has another announcement." Obina nodded. "I do." He looked toward the human resources director. "Please bring the list." The HR director hurried onto the stage carrying a blue folder. Obina opened it slowly. Effective immediately, the room became completely silent. All employees found to have participated in corruption are dismissed from this company. No one looked surprised. They had expected that. But, Obina continued, every honest employee whose promotion was delayed because of favoritism will be reviewed immediately. Excited whispers spread across the hall. He kept reading. Every cleaner and security guard will receive a salary increase effective next month. The security guards looked at one another in disbelief. The cleaners covered their mouths. Medical insurance will now include every employee regardless of position. More applause. The staff welfare fund will be expanded. Performance promotions will replace favoritism. No employee will ever again be required to pay or offer gifts before receiving opportunities. The applause grew louder. Obina smiled. This company is going back to the values on which it was built. After the meeting ended, employees slowly gathered in small groups throughout the compound. For the first time in years, people openly discussed the problems they had endured. One cleaner wiped away tears. I thought nobody cared. Another nodded. I almost resigned. A young engineer smiled. The owner actually listened. An older security guard laughed. And we thought Obi was just one of us. Another guard smiled. He was. He simply happened to own the company. They all laughed together. Meanwhile, inside one of the executive offices, Obina held a private meeting with the remaining board members. The chairman spoke first. The evidence you've gathered is remarkable. Obina nodded. Unfortunately, it's only the beginning. What do you mean? We cleaned one department. He looked around the room. Now we must rebuild the company. The board members listened carefully. I don't want people to obey because they're afraid. I want them to work honestly because integrity becomes our culture. One director smiled. That's much harder. I know, but it's the only way. Later that afternoon, Obina requested another meeting. This one was much smaller. Only Adiz, the chairman, the head of human resources, and himself. Adiz entered the conference room looking nervous. She still struggled to believe everything that had happened. Obi, the man she had laughed with, shared lunch with, prayed for, was actually Obina Okafor, the billionaire owner of the company. She greeted everyone politely before sitting down. Obina smiled gently. Thank you for coming. She nodded quietly. You wanted to see me? Yes. The HR director placed several documents on the table. Obina pushed them toward her. Adiz. She looked down. The first document officially cleared her of every accusation. The second restored her employment. The third announced her promotion. She looked up in surprise. I've been promoted? Obina nodded. You've earned it. You'll become acting head of financial compliance. Her eyes widened. But I've only worked here for 2 years. He smiled. And during those 2 years, you protected this company more than people who had worked here for 20. Fresh tears filled her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes. She laughed softly through her tears. Yes. Everyone in the room smiled. After the meeting ended, the HR director and chairman quietly left the room. Only Obina and Adiz remained. Silence settled between them. Finally, Adiz spoke. I still can't believe it. What part? She smiled faintly. Everything. She looked directly at him. When we first met, I thought you worried about paying rent. He laughed quietly. So did everyone else. You carried heavy boxes. You stood in the rain. You shared lunch with security guards. He nodded. Yes. You could have stayed inside your office. I could have. Why didn't you? Obina became thoughtful. When I started this company, he leaned back in his chair. I was poorer than the security guards working here. She looked surprised. My first office had no electricity. I couldn't afford staff. I mixed cement myself. I slept on construction sites. He smiled at the memories. I promised myself that if I ever became successful. He paused. I would never forget those days. She listened carefully. Somewhere along the way, he sighed. My company forgot. I needed to know why. Adiz nodded slowly. I understand that part. She hesitated. But, why didn't you tell me? The question hung heavily in the room. Obinna looked down briefly before answering. Because I needed someone to treat me as an ordinary man. She remained silent. I've spent years wondering whether people liked me. He smiled sadly. Or my money. You never had that problem with me. No. You treated me kindly before knowing who I was. He looked into her eyes. That meant more than you'll ever understand. Adiz smiled faintly. I never imagined. She laughed softly. That I was buying meat pies for a billionaire. Obinna laughed too. They were the best meat pies I've ever eaten. They both laughed for several moments. The tension eased slightly. Later that evening, Obinna walked through the company compound alone. The parking lot had emptied. The cleaners had gone home. Only a few security guards remained on duty. He stopped near the gate where everything had begun. The small security booth still stood exactly as before. The old chair, the visitor register, the faded umbrella. He stepped inside. Everything reminded him of the past 2 months. The conversations, the laughter, the difficult days, the long hours. For the first time in many years, he understood his own company better than ever before. An older security guard approached. Sir. Obinna smiled. You don't have to call me sir. The guard laughed. I don't think I can help it anymore. Obinna smiled warmly. Thank you. For what? For welcoming me. The guard scratched his head. We didn't know who you were. I know. That's exactly why it mattered. The old man smiled proudly. That night, newspapers across Nigeria carried the same shocking headline. Billionaire disguises himself as security guard. Exposes multi-million naira fraud in his own company. Television stations replayed footage from the shareholders' meeting. Social media exploded with reactions. Many praised Obinna's courage. Others admired his humility. Thousands of people discussed the young accountant who refused to compromise her integrity despite overwhelming pressure. By the next morning, Adiz had become an unexpected symbol of honesty throughout Nigeria. Journalists requested interviews. Television producers invited her onto programs. She politely declined them all. She had never wanted fame. She simply wanted to do her job honestly. Meanwhile, inside his mansion, Obinna stood alone on his balcony overlooking the sparkling lights of Enugu. The cool evening breeze brushed against his face as he thought about everything that had happened. Justice had finally been served. The guilty had been arrested. The innocent had been vindicated. His company had been given a second chance. But one question still remained unanswered. Would Adiz ever truly forgive him for hiding his identity? She had smiled that afternoon. She had accepted her promotion. They had even laughed together. Yet he had noticed something lingering behind her eyes. A quiet uncertainty. Trust, once shaken, was not easily rebuilt. Obinna understood that. Love could survive many things, but only if it was rooted in truth. He looked toward the stars above Enugu and quietly whispered to himself, I've saved my company. A gentle smile crossed his face. Now I hope I haven't lost the woman I love. Unknown to him, at that very moment, Adiz sat by the window of her modest apartment thinking about the same man. The billionaire owner. The humble security guard. The friend who had stood beside her when the whole company believed she was guilty. Her heart was caught between gratitude and confusion. She knew Obi had been real, but she was still trying to understand Obinna. And before their story could move forward, they would both have to answer one difficult question. Can love survive a secret, even when that secret was told for the right reasons? 3 weeks had passed since the unforgettable shareholders' meeting. Life at Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited had changed dramatically. The atmosphere inside the company felt lighter. Employees smiled more often. Managers greeted cleaners by name. Security guards were no longer treated as though they were invisible. The salary increases Obinna had promised had already taken effect, and the staff cafeteria now served every employee equally, regardless of rank. The company was slowly becoming the workplace Obinna had always dreamed of building. Yet despite all those victories, one part of his life remained painfully uncertain. Adiz. Although she had accepted her promotion as acting head of financial compliance, she had become noticeably distant from him. She remained polite. She remained respectful. But something had changed. The effortless laughter they once shared at the company gate had disappeared. The warm conversations over meat pies and bottles of water were now replaced with brief greetings and professional discussions. Whenever they were together, there was an invisible wall between them. Obinna noticed it immediately, and it hurt more than he expected. One Friday afternoon, after the office had begun to empty, Obinna stood in his spacious office on the top floor of the headquarters. It was the same office he had avoided for nearly 2 months while pretending to be a security guard. The city of Enugu stretched beautifully beyond the glass windows. Normally, the view calmed him. Today, it did nothing. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Come in." His personal assistant, Chinedu, entered carrying several files. "Sir, these require your signature." Obinna signed them absent-mindedly. Chinedu hesitated before speaking. "You've barely touched your lunch." "I'm not hungry." "You've also canceled dinner meetings 3 times this week." Obinna smiled weakly. "I know." Chinedu closed the folder. "This isn't about the company, is it?" Obinna leaned back in his chair. "No, it's Adiz." Chinedu nodded. "I thought so." "She's still keeping her distance." "What do you expect?" Obinna looked at him. "I don't mean that disrespectfully, sir." "I know." Chinedu continued gently. "She trusted Obi. Then she discovered Obi wasn't who she believed." Obinna sighed deeply. "I never lied about my character." "No. But you hid your identity." "I had to. I know why." Chinedu smiled kindly. "But understanding your reasons doesn't erase how she feels." Those words stayed with Obinna long after Chinedu left the office. Meanwhile, Adiz sat quietly in her apartment that evening. Her younger brother, Emeka, was doing his homework at the dining table while her younger sister, Chioma, prepared dinner in the small kitchen. Life was finally becoming stable again. Her job had been restored. Her reputation had been cleared. Her promotion had increased her salary. For the first time in years, she no longer worried constantly about paying school fees or rent. She should have been happy, yet her heart remained unsettled. Chioma noticed immediately. "You've been staring at that cup of tea for 10 minutes. Adiz smiled faintly. "Have I?" "You're thinking about him." Emeka looked up from his notebook. "The security guard?" Chioma laughed. "Not exactly. The billionaire." Emeka grinned. "I still can't believe that story." Neither could Adiz. Every memory of Obi now carried a new meaning. The quiet man who stood in the rain, the security guard who shared lunch with cleaners, the friend who listened without judging, all of it had been real. But at the same time, he had hidden the biggest truth about himself. Chioma sat beside her. "Do you still care about him?" Adiz looked out the window. "I don't know." "Yes, you do." She smiled sadly. "I do." "So what's the problem?" Adiz took a deep breath. "I don't know which version of him I fell in love with." "The billionaire?" She shook her head. "The security guard." "But they're the same person." "Are they?" Emeka spoke quietly from across the room. "I think they are." The two sisters looked at him. He shrugged. "If he pretended to be rich, I'd understand. But he pretended to be poor." Chioma nodded slowly. "That's different." Emeka smiled. "From everything you've told us. He was kind before you knew he was rich. He was kind after you found out. So maybe the only thing that changed," he closed his notebook, "was what you knew." Adiz remained silent. Her little brother's words lingered in her mind. The following Monday, Obinna requested a meeting with Adiz. When the message reached her desk, she hesitated for several minutes before accepting. She knocked gently on his office door. "May I come in?" "Please." She stepped inside. The office felt enormous. Modern artwork decorated the walls. Awards lined polished shelves. Large windows overlooked the city. It was difficult to believe this luxurious space belonged to the same man who had once sat with her beneath a tree eating roasted corn. Obina gestured toward the chair opposite his desk. Please sit. She did. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Obina broke the silence. I owe you an apology. Adiz looked at him. I know I've already apologized before, but I don't think I truly explained myself. She listened quietly. When I started this investigation, I promised myself I wouldn't tell anyone who I was. Not even you. He smiled sadly. That decision protected the investigation. But it also hurt someone I care deeply about. Adiz lowered her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I know. No. He shook his head. I don't think you do. He stood and walked toward the window. I've spent years wondering whether people loved Obina. He looked back at her. Or the life Obina could give them. I wanted one relationship that wasn't influenced by money. She remained silent. I found that relationship. His voice softened. But it came at the cost of your trust. Adiz finally spoke. When I first met you, you were standing in the rain. You helped cleaners. You carried heavy boxes. You accepted food from me. She smiled faintly. I thought you needed my kindness. Obina nodded. I did. But not because I was poor. No, because I was lonely. The honesty in his voice surprised her. He continued. Do you know something strange? She shook her head. During those 2 months, I was happier as Obi than I'd been in years as Obina. Why? Because people spoke to me honestly. No one wanted contracts. No one asked for favors. No one tried to impress me. He laughed softly. I even learned what my own security guards complained about. That made Adiz smile despite herself. Obina noticed. It was the first genuine smile he had seen from her in weeks. You smiled. She quickly looked away. I didn't mean to. I'm glad you did. She sighed. You make this difficult. I know. She looked directly into his eyes. Do you know what hurt most? He shook his head. You watched me tell you things I'd never told anyone. My parents. My fears. My siblings. You knew everything about me. I knew almost nothing about you. Obina closed his eyes briefly. You're right. I can't defend that. I was wrong. The room fell silent again. Finally, he spoke. I don't expect forgiveness today. I don't expect it tomorrow either. He reached into his desk drawer and removed a small envelope. He placed it gently on the table. What is this? A letter. She looked surprised. I wrote everything I couldn't say properly. You don't have to read it now. You can throw it away if you want. She slowly picked it up. I'll read it. Thank you. Over the next few weeks, Obina made a conscious decision. He stopped trying to win Adiz back with expensive gestures. There were no luxury gifts, no surprise vacations, no extravagant displays of wealth. Instead, he became the same Obi she had always known. He visited the staff cafeteria regularly. He continued greeting cleaners every morning. He remembered employees' birthdays. He ate lunch with junior staff. He listened more than he spoke. People throughout the company began noticing. One engineer whispered, "The chairman is eating with us?" Another laughed. "I think he's serious about changing this place." Adiz quietly observed everything. None of it appeared staged. He behaved exactly as he had when wearing the security uniform. Slowly, she realized something important. Obi had never been an act. The disguise had hidden his wealth, not his heart. One rainy evening, employees rushed toward the parking lot after work. Adiz stood under the building entrance waiting for the rain to slow. Suddenly, she noticed an elderly cleaner struggling to carry several heavy buckets across the courtyard. Without hesitation, Obina walked into the rain. He took the buckets from the woman. "You'll slip. I can manage." "I know." He smiled. "But you shouldn't have to." Adiz froze. Those were the exact words he had once spoken to her when carrying her files. He walked the cleaner safely to the storage room before returning, completely soaked. As he passed Adiz, he smiled sheepishly. "I suppose I never learned to avoid the rain." For the first time in weeks, she laughed. A real laugh. The sound made Obina smile too. "I've missed hearing that." She looked at him for a long moment. "So have I." That night, Adiz sat alone in her apartment reading the letter Obina had given her. The handwriting was neat but deeply personal. He spoke about his childhood, his late mother, the loneliness that came with wealth, the fear of never knowing who genuinely cared for him. He admitted every mistake without making excuses. Near the end of the letter, one paragraph made tears fill her eyes. "If I could choose again, I would still become a security guard to save my company. But I would find the courage to tell you the truth sooner, because losing your trust has been more painful than discovering corruption in my business. I don't ask you to love me today. I only ask for the chance to earn your trust again, one honest day at a time." Adiz slowly folded the letter and held it close to her heart. Outside, rain tapped gently against her window. For the first time since learning the truth, the anger inside her began to soften. Trust could not be rebuilt overnight. Neither could love. But she was beginning to see what her younger brother had understood long before she did. The billionaire had been hiding behind the security guard's uniform. Yet the kindness, humility, compassion, and quiet strength she had fallen in love with had never been part of the disguise. They had always belonged to the man himself. And somewhere deep inside her heart, a door she thought had closed forever had begun to open once again. The road ahead would still require patience, honesty, and healing. But for the first time since the truth came out, both Obina and Adiz could finally see hope waiting at the end of it. 3 months had passed since the dramatic shareholders' meeting that changed the future of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited. The company was almost unrecognizable. The atmosphere that had once been poisoned by fear and corruption had been replaced with respect, honesty, and teamwork. Employees greeted one another with genuine smiles. Managers now knew the names of the cleaners and security guards. Suggestion boxes had been installed throughout the company, and every employee, from the newest intern to the most senior executive, could submit ideas or report concerns without fear of punishment. Obina made sure those reports were read personally. Every Friday morning, he walked through every department, shaking hands with workers and asking a simple question. How can we make this company better? At first, employees had been nervous. They wondered if the billionaire owner was simply trying to impress people after the scandal. But week after week, month after month, he continued showing up. He ate in the staff cafeteria. He joined cleaners for breakfast. He congratulated interns on good work. He even spent time at the security post where his undercover journey had begun. Slowly, everyone realized something important. The humble security guard they had known as Obi had never disappeared. He had simply changed back into a suit. For Adiz's life had also changed. As acting head of financial compliance, she had introduced stricter auditing procedures and transparent financial systems that made corruption much more difficult. She worked long hours, but she no longer carried the burden alone. Her younger brother, Emeka, had passed his examinations with excellent grades and received a scholarship arranged quietly by the company's education support program. Her younger sister, Chioma, had begun preparing for university with renewed confidence. The constant fear of unpaid rent and school fees had faded. For the first time since her parents died, Adiz could breathe a little easier. And little by little, she found herself smiling around Obina again. The awkward silence that once existed between them slowly disappeared. They began talking during lunch breaks, sometimes about work, sometimes about books, sometimes about their childhood memories. Their friendship, though different now, felt genuine once again. It was built not on secrets, but on honesty. One Saturday afternoon, Obina visited the old security post. The elderly security guard who had worked beside him during his undercover days laughed as soon as he saw him. "Chairman," Obina smiled. "I've told you before. You can still call me Obi." The old man shook his head dramatically. "My wife would never believe me if I said I shared tea with a billionaire." Both men laughed. As they talked, Obina looked toward the gate where he had first met Adiz. It still amazed him how much his life had changed because of one simple greeting. "Good morning." 2 ordinary words. Yet they had led him to the woman he loved. That evening, Obinna invited Chinedu to his house. His personal assistant noticed something different immediately. "You've been smiling all week." Obinna laughed. "Have I?" "You definitely have." He poured 2 cups of coffee. "So?" Chinedu leaned forward. "When are you finally going to ask her?" Obinna nearly spilled his drink. "Ask who?" "The only woman you've thought about for months." Obinna smiled sheepishly. "I don't know." "You know. I just don't know when." Chinedu laughed. "The whole company already knows." "They do. The cleaners know. The drivers know. The gardeners know. I suspect even the pigeons around the compound know." Obinna burst into laughter. "I don't want to pressure her." "I know. But you've already spent months rebuilding trust." Chinedu became serious. "If you keep waiting forever, you may lose the opportunity." Obinna stared thoughtfully into his coffee. Perhaps Chinedu was right. The following week, the company prepared for another major event. This time, it was not an emergency shareholders meeting. It was the official reopening ceremony celebrating the company's transformation after months of reforms. Government officials accepted invitations. Business partners planned to attend. Employees looked forward to the celebration. The event would symbolize a fresh beginning. As Obinna reviewed the ceremony schedule, an idea slowly formed in his mind. He smiled. This is the day. Meanwhile, Adiz remained completely unaware of his plans. She was busy organizing financial reports for the ceremony. One afternoon, Chioma noticed her sister humming while preparing dinner. "You've been happy lately." Adiz smiled. "Have I?" "Very." Chioma grinned. "Does it have anything to do with a certain billionaire?" Adiz laughed. "Maybe. So you've forgiven him." She paused thoughtfully. "I think." She smiled softly. "I forgave Obi long before I forgave Obinna." Chioma looked confused. "What does that mean?" Adiz stirred the soup slowly. "The security guard never hurt me. The businessman did." She looked toward the window. "But I finally realized. They're the same man." Chioma smiled knowingly. And I love them both." The day of the reopening ceremony finally arrived. The company compound looked magnificent. Blue and white decorations covered the entrance. Fresh flowers lined the pathways. Traditional musicians welcomed guests with lively performances. Employees wore elegant uniforms specially designed for the occasion. Laughter filled the air. Unlike previous corporate events, this celebration included everyone. Security guards, cleaners, drivers, gardeners, receptionists, interns. Everyone was invited. Obinna insisted on it. "This company belongs to all of us," he had said. "No one will celebrate outside the gates." As guests settled into their seats, the chairman welcomed everyone. He spoke briefly about the company's remarkable transformation. Then he invited Obinna onto the stage. Thunderous applause filled the hall. Obinna smiled warmly. He looked around at the hundreds of faces before him. Many of those faces had once doubted him. Many had once ignored him while he stood at the gate in his faded uniform. Now they looked at him with admiration. He adjusted the microphone. "A few months ago," he began, "I stood outside this building wearing a security uniform." Soft laughter spread through the audience. "I learned more during those weeks than I had learned in years sitting in this office." He smiled toward the security guards seated together. "You taught me." Then he looked toward the cleaners. "You reminded me." Finally, his eyes found Adiz sitting quietly in the front row. "And one person," his voice softened, "changed my life forever." The audience followed his gaze. Everyone looked toward Adiz. She immediately felt her cheeks grow warm. Obinna continued. "She treated a security guard with dignity. She defended someone everyone else ignored. She showed me that kindness doesn't depend on titles." He slowly stepped down from the stage. The hall became completely silent. Every step he took brought him closer to Adiz. She looked up at him with growing curiosity. When he finally reached her, he smiled. "Would you come with me?" She nodded nervously. He gently offered his hand. She accepted it. Together, They walked onto the stage. The audience watched in complete silence. Obinna turned toward the crowd. I've signed contracts worth billions of naira. I've negotiated with presidents. I've spoken before thousands of investors. He smiled at Adiz. But this, he took a slow breath, is the most important moment of my life. Adiz's heart began beating faster. Obinna reached into his pocket. The entire hall seemed to stop breathing. He slowly knelt on one knee. A collective gasp echoed throughout the room. Employees covered their mouths. Several cleaners immediately began crying. The security guards looked at one another in excitement. Obinna looked directly into Adiz's eyes. When I became a security guard, he smiled. I thought I was searching for corruption. A tear rolled down his cheek. But God allowed me to find something far greater. He gently opened a small velvet box. Inside rested a beautiful diamond engagement ring. I found the woman who loved me before she knew my name. The woman who saw dignity where others saw status. The woman who reminded me why I built this company. He took another breath. Adiz. His voice trembled slightly. I cannot promise that life will always be easy. I cannot promise that we'll never face challenges. But I promise, he smiled warmly, to always be as honest with you as the man you met at the company gate. Fresh tears streamed down Adiz's face. I promise to listen before speaking, to respect you, to protect your dreams, to stand beside you in every season of life. He looked deeply into her eyes. My greatest achievement will never be building companies. It will be building a life with you. He smiled. Adiz, will you marry me? The hall became completely silent. Hundreds of people waited. Seconds felt like hours. Adiz looked at the man kneeling before her. She remembered the rainy mornings, the shared meat pies, the conversations beneath the tree, the security guard who quietly helped everyone, the billionaire who had apologized without excuses, the friend who had earned back her trust one honest day at a time. She smiled through her tears. Then she whispered the one word everyone had been hoping to hear. Yes. The hall erupted. Thunderous applause echoed through the building. Employees leaped to their feet. Some whistled. Others cried openly. The security guards hugged one another. The cleaners clapped joyfully. Even the board members wiped away tears. Obinna gently slipped the ring onto Adiz's finger. Then he stood and embraced her. The applause grew even louder. As the celebration continued, the elderly security guard who had worked with Obinna during his undercover mission quietly leaned toward another guard. You know. What? I always thought those two belonged together. The younger guard smiled. So did I. They both laughed. Across the room, Chinedu watched the happy couple dancing with employees instead of remaining on the VIP stage. He smiled to himself. Some people built companies. Some people built fortunes. Very few people built both a successful business and a beautiful love story. Obinna had finally done both. As music filled the hall and laughter echoed through every corner of the building, one truth became beautifully clear. The billionaire had disguised himself as a security guard to discover the character of his employees. Instead, he had discovered the woman who would become the greatest blessing of his life. Their engagement marked not the end of their journey, but the beginning of a future built on trust, forgiveness, humility, and love. And though neither of them knew it yet, their greatest adventure together was only just beginning. 1 year later, the morning sun rose gently over Enugu, casting a golden glow across the city that had witnessed one of the most remarkable corporate transformations in Nigeria. The headquarters of Okafor Construction and Engineering Limited looked as impressive as ever, but something far more important than its glass walls or elegant architecture had changed. The people inside had changed. Gone were the days when cleaners were ignored. Gone were the days when security guards were treated as though they were invisible. Gone were the days when promotions depended on bribery or favoritism. Respect had become part of the company's identity. And at the heart of that transformation stood two people whose lives had been forever changed by a simple greeting at a company gate. Obinna and Adiz Okafor. The company had become a model for ethical leadership across Nigeria. Business schools invited Obinna to speak about corporate culture. Universities studied his undercover investigation as a unique example of servant leadership. International organizations requested meetings to learn how one company had successfully rebuilt trust after a major corruption scandal. Journalists often asked the same question. What was the secret? Obinna always smiled before answering. The secret wasn't exposing corruption. It was rewarding integrity. He had learned that people became honest not simply because they feared punishment. They became honest when honesty was respected. Inside the headquarters, employees no longer feared walking into management offices. Suggestion boxes had evolved into monthly staff forums where every worker could speak openly. Security guards now attended leadership workshops. Cleaners received scholarships for their children. Drivers participated in financial planning seminars. Medical care covered every employee and their immediate family. The company even created an emergency assistance fund for workers facing unexpected hardships. Many business owners called these changes expensive. Obinna disagreed. They're investments. He often said, when employees know they're valued, they protect the company as though it were their own. Time proved him right. Employee satisfaction reached record levels. Productivity increased dramatically. The company's profits exceeded anything it had achieved before the scandal. Kindness had become good business. For Adiz, married life brought a different kind of happiness. She had officially become Director of Financial Integrity and Corporate Compliance, a newly created department responsible for ensuring transparency throughout the company. She accepted the position only after setting one condition. No one, not even my husband, will interfere with investigations. Obinna laughed when she said it. I wouldn't expect anything less. She kept her promise. Whenever financial concerns arose, she investigated them thoroughly, regardless of who was involved. Employees respected her because they knew she was fair. She never allowed her position as the owner's wife to influence her decisions. In fact, many joked that Obinna himself feared her audits. He laughed louder than anyone else. One Monday morning, the company celebrated its first anniversary since the reforms. Employees gathered in the main courtyard for breakfast. There was no separate table for executives. No VIP dining area. Everyone ate together. Obinna moved from table to table greeting employees. Good morning. The phrase still made him smile. It reminded him of the woman who had changed his life. Across the courtyard, Adiz laughed as one of the cleaners teased her about always arriving early. Watching her, Obinna couldn't help smiling. She hadn't changed. Success hadn't made her proud. Marriage hadn't changed her kindness. She still greeted everyone by name. She still stopped to help anyone carrying something heavy. She was still the same woman who had once shared her lunch with a security guard she believed barely earned enough to survive. As the celebration ended, Chinedu approached Obinna. Sir. Obinna raised an eyebrow. You've started calling me sir again. Chinedu laughed. Force of habit. What is it? The journalists are here. Oh, they're asking whether you'll ever work undercover again. Obinna smiled mysteriously. Tell them. He paused. They'll have to wait and see. Unknown to almost everyone inside the company, Obinna had quietly developed a new tradition. Every few months, he visited one of the company's branches in disguise. Sometimes he dressed as a delivery driver, sometimes as a maintenance worker, other times as an ordinary customer. Only two people knew about these surprise visits, the chairman and Adiz. Even then, Adiz never asked where or when. She simply smiled and said, Go and learn. Obinna always returned with valuable lessons. Sometimes he discovered small problems before they became serious. Sometimes he simply confirmed that employees continued treating people with dignity. Either way, the visits reminded him never to become disconnected from the people who built his company every day. One rainy afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after his first day as a security guard, Obinna stood quietly outside the old security post. The same elderly security guard still worked there. His hair had become even grayer, but his smile remained just as warm. You've come back. Obinna nodded. I felt like visiting. The old man laughed. I still remember the day you arrived, wearing that oversized uniform, and pretending not to know anything. Obina laughed. I wasn't pretending. I really didn't know what my company had become. The guard smiled. You know. What? When you first came, I thought you looked too educated to be a security guard. Obina laughed loudly. I hoped nobody noticed. Oh, we noticed. Then why didn't anyone say anything? The old guard grinned. We figured everyone deserves a chance to earn an honest living. Those simple words made Obina smile. Even after all this time, kindness continued teaching him lessons. Later that evening, Obina and Adiz drove to the small cemetery where both of their parents were buried. It had become a tradition. Every anniversary of the company's transformation, they visited to reflect on how far they had come. They placed fresh flowers on the graves. For several minutes, they stood silently. Finally, Adiz spoke. I wish they could see us. Obina gently squeezed her hand. I think they can. She smiled softly. My father would have liked you. I hope so. He would. She laughed. He'd probably remind you to stop working so much. Obina chuckled. Your father and my mother would have made a dangerous team. They both believed kindness was non-negotiable. Adiz nodded. They'd be proud. As they drove home, they passed the very bus stop where Adiz used to wait every evening after work. She smiled as she looked out the window. Do you remember? Obina followed her gaze. Every single day. I used to think you were just another hard-working security guard. And I used to think you were simply the kindest accountant in Enugu. She laughed. I suppose we were both right. He reached across and held her hand. Yes, we were. Several weeks later, another surprising event reminded everyone that Obina had not changed. A young applicant arrived at the company for a job interview. He wore worn-out clothes because he couldn't afford better. The receptionist welcomed him warmly. The security guard offered him water. The cleaner showed him where to wait. A manager personally greeted him. Watching quietly from the second-floor window, Obina smiled. 1 year earlier, that young man might have been turned away before speaking. Now he was treated with dignity from the moment he entered. The culture had truly changed. That afternoon, Obina called all department heads together. There is something I want to share. The room became quiet. He displayed a photograph on the projector. It showed him wearing the faded security uniform from a year earlier. Several managers smiled. Some laughed softly. Obina looked around the room. I keep this photograph to remind myself of something important. What is that, sir? One manager asked. He smiled. No position is small. No job is insignificant. The value of a person is never determined by the uniform they wear. He paused. If we ever forget that lesson, he looked at the photograph once more. Then everything we rebuilt will begin to crumble. The room fell silent. Every manager understood exactly what he meant. That evening, as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills surrounding Enugu, Obina and Adiz stood together on the balcony of their home. The city lights gradually illuminated the streets below. It was peaceful. Adiz rested her head gently against his shoulder. Do you ever regret becoming a security guard? Obina smiled. Not for a second. It changed everything. It saved my company. He looked at her lovingly. And it brought me to you. She smiled. I almost didn't talk to you that first morning. He looked surprised. Really? I was running late. What changed your mind? She laughed softly. My father always said. She looked up at the stars. Never pass another human being without offering kindness if you have the chance. Obina smiled. I'm very grateful you listened. So am I. For a long moment, they simply stood together watching the lights of Enugu sparkle beneath the evening sky. Their journey had begun with suspicion, hidden identities, and painful misunderstandings. It had survived betrayal, corruption, and secrets. Yet through every challenge, one truth remained constant. Character mattered more than status. Kindness mattered more than wealth. Integrity mattered more than success. The billionaire had disguised himself as a security guard to discover whether his employees truly lived by the values upon which he had built his company. Instead, he discovered something even greater. He found a woman who believed that every person deserved dignity, whether they wore a tailored business suit or a faded security uniform. And together, they proved that the strongest foundations are not made of concrete or steel. They are built with honesty, strengthened by humility, protected by compassion, and held together by love. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from.